Why I love books. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I wanted to talk about why I love books. What made me start collecting books? I've been thinking a lot about this lately. What made me start this lifelong love with books? And I think it dates back to my childhood, and it probably does for most people. And I would also love to hear why you love books. I think it would be really interesting to see what reasons we have for loving books so much. Okay, I have to start by saying I am a very curious cat. Yeah, I always have been. Ever since I was little, I wanted to know everything, just everything. I had 1,000,001 questions and I would bombard my teachers and my parents with questions because I just wanted to know everything. And you have to remember, I was born in the 60s. We did not have the internet. We did not have our phones. Basically, you had to rely on books for information. I didn't grow up with parents who read to me every night. My parents were immigrants. English wasn't their first language, nor did they really read all that much other than, say, newspapers or magazines. And I remember I was about 4, I think, when my mum bought me my very first book, a little golden book. I'm going to see if I can find a photo and show you what they look like. I don't know if they sell them anymore. And that started me on this lifelong obsession with books because I realized that there was this magic in between these sheets of paper, stories that inspired or fired your imagination. Plus a lot of knowledge that I didn't have, things that people couldn't answer, I could find in books. After my little golden book, I realized that, wow, there was so much joy to be had from a story. So I started borrowing books from libraries. And I don't know about you, but I just have this lifelong passion for libraries. I love seeing hundreds or thousands of books in the one place. There is just something so calming and relaxing about being surrounded by books. That's what I think anyway. And of course, the knowledge that they can give us is infinite almost. We will never be able to read all the books that exist, nor would we want to, I guess. But every book, I feel, has something to teach me or show me, something that perhaps I haven't considered before. And I think for me, the major reason I loved books so much as I was growing up was how much knowledge I gained from them, how much information I learned about history, about politics, about other places around the world. And there is something about holding a book in your hand, a physical book, smelling it, touching it, flipping the pages. I just love that whole ritual. I love holding a book in my hand and I love disappearing into another world, whatever it is. The first books I really remember reading were the Brumby series. I can't recall the name of the author, but I'll put it on the screen. It is an Australian author. That I do know. Brumbies are what we call wild horses in Australia. And I just loved it. Well, I was crazy about horses, but then which girl isn't? But this story was so charming. And I still vaguely remember it. And it must be at least almost 50 years ago that I read this book. So that, I think, is the very first book that I can remember reading, other than this golden book. I don't even remember what that was about. But the Brumby series, I remember very vividly. And I think by the time I started high school, my physical disability had become apparent and I simply couldn't do a lot of the activities that other kids could do. I could do some, but not much. So of course, books were an escape for me. They were something that I could do. So naturally, books became my preferred leisure activity because I could get lost in these worlds that people have either created or that I was unfamiliar with, and I could learn new things all the time, which I just loved. So by the time I got to high school, I was raiding their library every week. I would always go home with books. And I remember reading a lot of Agatha Christie and the Hardy Boys and Lucy Walker, who writes about the Australian outback. I discovered romance, so I read a lot of romances as well. I did not like books, though, that were geared towards teenagers. Yeah, not even then. I've never liked young adult fiction. I preferred more adult books. I also discovered Georgette Heyer. Oh, I just adore her. She is still one of my favourite romance or historical romance writers. But I remember when I picked up the very first book of hers, I needed a dictionary because I didn't know what pantaloons were or monocles or mincing or all these other words that were unfamiliar to me. But reading books that had a lot of words I didn't recognize also helped broaden my vocabulary. It allowed me to be able to express myself better because I was learning all these new words. We are so shaped by what we do as children, I think. I was actually talking about it today with someone that, your mum teaches you your ritual, your morning ritual, whatever it is. And you still do it to this day. Well, I still do 50 or so years later. And I think having read so much when I was a child, it's very natural to just pick up a book because I know I'm going to enjoy it. I know I'm going to get lost in this world, and it feels familiar and yet not. Familiar in the sense that I can immerse myself in something that is outside of me, and I will most likely learn something new, whatever it is. That is something that still gives me joy to this day, that I never know what I'm going to find in between these pages. I don't know whether I'm going to laugh or cry or just feel very contented that I'm reading about something different to my own world. I think that is the greatest charm of books, is you can explore worlds that perhaps physically you can't, whether it's because it's fantasy or you can't travel somewhere, and you learn new things all the time. I learned so much about history, for example, from books, about different races or customs. There's just always something new to learn, and that is definitely my favourite reason for reading. Now, as I've gotten older, of course, it is also for the pure pleasure of it, for reading something that is beautifully written, that makes you either feel warm and fuzzy, or can make you cry or laugh, or make you think about an issue or a perspective that you have never considered before. Being able to explore characters who may have different lives to ours, I think broadens our minds. It helps us understand people who are not like us and empathize with a perspective or people that we may never otherwise have met. Honestly, there are just so many reasons why I love books. It's really hard to articulate it well. As to why I collect books, I blame my mum for that. She was the one who bought me my very first golden book. And I think when you discover how much joy and pleasure books can give you, it's almost natural to want to accumulate some, especially for someone like me who rereads things all the time. Perhaps because I just love the look of books on shelves, which I really do, I always have. Libraries are one of my favourite places to visit, other than bookshops where you can buy them, but I just love that sense of serenity and peace that being surrounded by books makes me feel. It makes it feel cozy. and warm and familiar too, I think. Knowing also that any book I pick up, I will be able to get lost in it, hopefully. Yeah, okay, there are some books that don't appeal to us, but generally speaking, most books that I own anyway, I can get lost in. I know that I won't even notice how much time passes as I'm reading it. But I do blame my mum for starting me on this collection of books because she bought me my first golden book. And when I was in my teens, I used to get an allowance, right? Every week. I think most kids do, right? And when my brother would go and spend it on, I don't know, pinballs or food, I would save it and go and buy books. I just loved being surrounded by them. Now I'm obsessive. Yeah, I don't deny it. I have way too many books. And I continue to buy because I love having them and reading them. And I think also a part of it for me is that I am in a wheelchair. It isn't that easy for me, for example, to go to libraries anymore. At least if I've got them at home, I can pick them up anytime I feel like it. And I can read it whenever I feel like it. I don't have to wait until I go to the library or to a bookshop. And frankly, I think we all have something we love to collect, whatever it is, or most people have anyway. Perhaps not as many as me, but I've had many years to collect books. And when I bought my very first bookcase, I remember thinking, I have to fill it now because it was empty. Not that I buy books just to fill the shelves, but I buy books that I feel I will reread again or that I just love so much that I want to have it. And there was a stage where I was only buying paperbacks, but I just love hardcovers so much that some of my favourite fantasy series, for example, I went to great lengths and cost to get them all in hardcovers because they just last so much longer as well. I guess everyone has their hobbies, right? And reading has always been one of mine. And I'm so glad I've rediscovered my great love for reading. I had really slowed down with the internet and access to any movies you like and great television series. I found I just wasn't reading as much as I used to. But the last year or so, I have definitely been spending a lot of time reading and I love it. It's something that feels very familiar and comforting. I'm sure I'm not the only person who can't go anywhere unless they have a book with them, usually more than one. But then that's the big plus, isn't it, with an e-reader. I think I started reading books on an e-reader, or my tablet actually, around 7 years ago. And I went to town. But I have to confess, I still prefer physical books, though there is a lot to be said for having an e-reader. I only bought this a few months ago. It's a Kobo Libra H20, I think it's called. This is the cover. And this is how big the e-reader is. I actually prefer it without the cover because the cover feels a little bit heavier. But I just love how many books you can have on it. And I think if you're going to go away or travel, rather than carrying all these heavy books, it is great to have something so small and light where you can have thousands of books on it. It's very handy and I do love it, but I won't deny, give me a physical book anytime. I definitely prefer it. Yeah, there's just something to be said about a physical book. The feel of it, the smell of it, it's very reminiscent of my childhood and the thousands and thousands of hours of joy that books have given me over the years. For me, books are one of my greatest pleasures. Just like food. Yeah, because I do like good food. Well, actually, I'm not that fussy regarding food. I just love food. But books, they just give us so much. I feel anyway. Now I would love to hear why you love books, how you got started on your road to being a book lover. And you can let me know down in the comments, or you can contact me on Instagram. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then you can do the usual. You can like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as it helps my channel to grow. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.